Thank you for downloading Children's Pedcast, a conversation about pediatrics with Children's Minnesota. My name is Jimmy Bellamy, and we're talking about car seat myths. I'm joined by Dex Tuttle, the Injury Prevention Program Coordinator at Children's. Dex, you hear this sometimes. It may seem like common sense not to do this, but we do read about it. And it's people saying, if I crack my window, it's okay to leave my child in the car.
Well, so we don't see that happen a lot, thankfully, but it's worth talking about because I think it's just one of those things where folks don't recognize the dynamics of what actually happens inside of the car, and even after a short period of time, how temperatures can rise to a very dangerous level.
I should preface this by saying this may not have anything to do particularly with car seats specifically, but it is kids in the car, and it's an important topic to cover because, like you had said, it may not happen all the time, but it does happen.
Well, right, it does, and it doesn't have things to do with car seats necessarily. Prior to 1998, there was no information on this topic, and a meteorologist out in California, in San Jose, I believe, by the name of Jan Null, was asked a question for the purposes of a news broadcast about a death that had happened back then. And he got curious and started tracking data, and so now it's his life's work. And what he found out in between 1998 and today, 54% of those kids that have died because of heat-related injuries or heat-related problems by being left in the car, 54% of them were forgotten by the parents. It can happen. I mean, we'd like to think that it's not going to happen to us, but we're busy as parents, sometimes sleep-deprived. And so your brain just kind of kicks into survival mode, and you forget about really important things sometimes.
Yeah, and that's good to point out. We've talked about it in a previous podcast when we were together last year, that a lot of things can happen when you are a parent and you're working on little to no sleep, that some of the basic, most common sense things can, no pun intended, kind of go out the window.
Mm. And in addition to that, not recognizing the dangers of a car that's exposed to sunlight is the other part of the issue. I mean, people are just taken by surprise by how much the temperature can rise inside of a car. Based on Jan Null's data again, 29% of those kids that died were just playing in the car. And the car was out in the driveway, they were playing, they got stuck, so it wasn't even necessarily on a trip that they were forgotten. They were just, the car was unlocked and the kids got in. So the myth is that you brought up anyway, Jimmy. Well, what if I just crack the windows? In the research that this meteorologist has done, that really has a negligible impact on the overall temperature, maybe by 5 or 10 degrees. So that's really not a temporary solution to leave your kid in the car with the windows cracked, or even a dog for that matter, or pets.
So it can happen a couple of ways. One, maybe it's what a parent is anticipating to be a quick in and out trip, but it often can be more than 50% in this case. Since 98, it's parents just plain forgetting that a child is in the vehicle.
Yeah, there are some companies that are developing technologies based on weight and whether or not the buckle is attached and that sort of thing on your car seat to alert your phone and through Bluetooth and things like that. But one of the easiest recommendations that I might have is to leave something that's important in the back seat. Just get in the habit of always leaving your lunch or your briefcase or whatever in the back seat, so you have to open up the door every time that you get in the car. Another suggestion that I heard from a parent that I love, that I think was a really cool idea, is always have a stuffed animal in the car seat. And then when you put your child in the seat, bring the stuffed animal up front. That will hopefully cue you that stuffed animal then needs to be buckled after you get your kid out of the car seat. So just another way to remember, another warning.
And it seems silly to have to do something like this, but it's necessary in a lot of cases. And I would want to, obviously this goes without saying, a child in the back is important, but what you're saying is important to the fact that you need to use it or have it to get to wherever you are going. That kids get forgotten because you don't need kids like you need keys to get in and out of a vehicle. So you could forget your child if you're in a state where you're not quite thinking right.
Yeah, your brain goes into autopilot sometimes as a parent, and or as anybody who's really sleep deprived. And I don't know if you're anything like me, but driving down the road, or just walking along or something, and then suddenly realize that you're much farther than the last time you remembered, and you just had slipped into this sort of daydream kind of world. It can happen to anybody, really.
What kind of temperatures are we talking about here as far as dangerous levels, and then what can happen?
So that's the alarming part, right? You don't think that this, I mean, it's hard to understand without actually experiencing the change in temperature, really. But you get in the car some days after your car's been parked outside, and it's really uncomfortable to touch the steering wheel. Well, that happens very, very quickly after you turn your car off and leave your car. Within the first 10 minutes, the temperature inside the car can increase by an average of 19 degrees. So almost 20 degrees hotter than it is outside just after 10 minutes. And then after 20 minutes, that's about 30 degrees higher. So really quickly, the temperature in your car is getting extraordinarily uncomfortable. In terms of, like, medically speaking, at 104 degrees core body temperature, that's when we start experiencing heat stroke. Like, your body starts giving you some real warning signs about what's going on, including dizziness, disorientation, confusion. Basically your system is starting to shut down in a way. And at 107 degrees core body temperature, your organs just simply can't sustain that temperature, and they start breaking down.
And I think that it does need to be said that just because the temperature is something outside doesn't mean that that is the temperature inside a vehicle. It can get hotter.
Well, in the example that I gave, so after 20 minutes, it's about 30 degrees hotter, right? So even if it's 70 degrees outside, your car within 20 minutes can be 100 degrees or hotter, and could get up to about 117 to 120 degrees. As adults, we're better at regulating our body temperature than kids are. Kids their body temperature will increase 3 to 5 times faster than ours. So they're much more at risk than we would be.
In those deaths since 1998, what are we looking at as far as the age of a child?
Well, when you think about that dynamic of the new parent, not totally adjusted yet to the sleep schedule and what the impact that has on your brain, it's not really a surprise that 54% of the kids who have died due to heat stroke related or hyperthermia related situations is about 54%, 1 year or younger. And then it goes down from there. About 20% of those kids that died were 2 years old. And then the numbers decrease as the kids get older. So again, to kind of illustrate that it's not an isolated problem. It has more to do with just the human condition, really, than it has to do with irresponsibility.
And no one is immune from this, so it's always good to be reminded of this and also employ some of those tactics when you are driving with your children.
Yeah, like you could, as we talked about, use the stuffed animal trick. If you have the capital and you want to, invest in some of these technologies that are available, that's always an option. You could just talk to your kid, have a conversation with your kid, even if the kid can't talk to you back. But, just that way your brain is in constant communication, or that sort of forces your brain to remember that your child is there. Of course, as long as that's not distracting to you as a driver. Just getting into a routine, leaving something in the back seat or whatever can be helpful. But just as importantly, don't let your kids play in an unattended car, so make sure you always lock the car when it's parked.
Thank you, Dex.
Yeah, you bet, man.